Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I have an iceberg centered around secret knowledge. Whether that be the knowledge itself, a repository of knowledge, ways people have tried gaining knowledge, or something else relating to knowledge, it's contained here. None of what is said here is intended to fight against accepted facts, but with that in mind, there will be some fiction alongside the facts, as anything speaking on conspiracy theories naturally does, but I'll do my best to separate what is accepted from what is not. I also need people to know that while I've done my best at research, there's a very real chance I get some things wrong. With the advent of AI and the enshittification of Google, finding trustworthy sources can be challenging, especially with something like this that jumps the line between accepted facts and conspiracies. If anyone has any comments that go against what is said in this video, I'll double check the information posted and pin the comment if it turns out to be true. With all the boilerplate out of the way, let's get on to how this whole thing works. This iceberg has 6 tiers, with about 8 entries per tier. I've researched all these topics and written the responses myself, no AI here. Anyway, kick back, relax, and let's learn together about all these topics. Tier 1. Library of Alexandria. The Library of Alexandria was one of the largest and most significant libraries in the ancient world. The library was believed to have been established during the reign of Ptolemy II, Philadelphus in 285 to 246 BC. The library was known for its aggressive stance on gaining knowledge, with the Ptolemaic rulers intending it to be a collection of all knowledge. Royal agents were given a decree to purchase and collect as many texts as they possibly could, about anything and written by anyone. Older texts were favored, as it was believed they would more closely resemble the original writings. According to a Greek source, any books found on ships that came into the port of Alexandria were to be copied, with the library keeping the original and the original owner gaining a copy. Alexandria the city came to be regarded as the capital of knowledge and learning due to this great library, and many great scholars worked at the library throughout its history. Some of the works of its scholars were the Argonautica, calculating the circumference of the Earth, the first recorded invention of the steam engine, the invention of Greek diacritics, or ways to vary the pronunciation of a word with accents, the definitive text of Homer, and the standardization of Homeric texts. The hope of the library was to use it to promote Hellenistic culture and learning throughout the known world, and to contain all great knowledge. But as things do, the Library of Alexandria would come to lose its influence gradually. In 145 BC, Alexandria began purging its intellectuals, which resulted in the head librarian resigning and exiling himself. And many other scholars followed suit, leaving for greener pastures. There was also the well-known fire in the library, although it appears this was done accidentally by Julius Caesar, and it's unclear as to how much knowledge was actually destroyed, as the library either survived or was rebuilt shortly thereafter. During the Roman period, the library dwindled further, lacking funding and support, and eventually, its membership was believed to have ceased by the 260s AD. Shortly after, in 270 to 275 AD, the remainder of the library was destroyed in a Palmyrene invasion, if it even existed at that point. As for its legacy, while it was certainly the largest and most prestigious library of the ancient world, it was hardly the only one. By 30 BC, almost every eastern Mediterranean city had a public library, and so did many medium-sized towns, and that number only grew into the Roman period. While the Alexandrian library declined, many other centers of academic excellence grew in its place in various other capital cities. Most of the works contained in Alexandria are believed to have even survived by way of these academic centers. Later, Muslim scholars would gain access to these works and translate these texts into Arabic, preserving them before being retranslated and reintroduced to Europe later in history. So while certainly some knowledge has been lost, it's not nearly as much as the average person believes was destroyed with the library. The Emerald Tablet. The Emerald Tablet, also known as the Smaragdine Tablet, or Tabula Smaragdina, was a short cryptic text attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. It is the birth of the phrase, as above, so below. The text is short, so I'll just repeat it verbatim through a translation. Truth, certainty, that in which there is no doubt. That which is above is from that which is below, and that which is below is from that which is above, working the miracles of one. As all things were from one. Its father is the sun, and its mother the moon. The earth carried it in her belly, and the winds nourished it in her belly, as earth which shall become fire. Feed the earth from that which is subtle, with the greatest power. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and becomes ruler over that which is above and that which is below. And I have already explained the meaning of the whole of this in 2 of these books of mine. Hermes was the father of alchemy and Hermeticism, having written what is known as the Hermetica, text which encompass a broad variety of treatises. The technical side of these deal with astrology, medicine, pharmacology, alchemy, and magic, while the religio-philosophical side focus on the relationship between human beings, the cosmos, and God, while calling for a certain way of life that leads to a spiritual rebirth into a heavenly ascent. This will be discussed further in a later topic, both the meaning of the phrase and Hermeticism as a whole. Nikola Tesla Hidden Inventions. Nikola Tesla is a renowned inventor, mainly known for his many patents related to the technology behind electricity. For example, his work on alternating current and the induction motor helped push forward technology standards. Most people who look into Tesla are probably drawn to his many unfinished ideas, the most popular being the concept of wireless power. Tesla believed that he could transmit electricity through the Earth's surface and ionosphere as a conductor, providing the world with wireless energy. While this project is mentioned frequently when researching Nikola Tesla, he had many other ideas and inventions that were less well known. One such invention was the idea of a remote-controlled navy. He was able to construct a small boat that could stop, start, steer with radio signals, and hoped to sell it to the US military as torpedoes, but they ultimately turned the idea down. Another idea was to create airships powered solely by a wireless electrical transmission, flying up to 40,000 feet off the ground. Other ideas were more destructive, with a steam-powered oscillator used to generate electricity accidentally causing an earthquake. While calibrating this machine, Tesla said his New York City lab began shaking so violently he believed it was about to bring the building down. He also had ideas for artificial tide waves and a death ray, but both of these devices were later experimented with and unable to live up to Tesla's vision. There is a story that Tesla modified a car in Buffalo, New York, removing the gasoline engine and replacing it with a brushless AC electrical motor that was purportedly powered by cosmic energy receivers, a box containing 12 radio vacuum tubes connected to a 6-foot-long antenna. This idea was spread by 2 authors, although Peter Savo is the more popular story. It is believed that he used continuous recycling of reactive power as a method by which the car could have potentially been powered. But considering the use of calling Tesla his uncle and Tesla having no nephews, it most likely lines up with the whole story being bogus. There is also talk of Tesla having his own dynamic theory of gravity, believing that gravity is an electromagnetic phenomenon and not a result of curved spacetime believed by Einstein. With this concept in mind, he appears to have believed that he could create an anti-gravity device. The issue with this topic is, as far as I can research, that I cannot find any good sources past the above information. There was a wiki article at one point in time, but that has long since been deleted. There is also a theory that Nikola Tesla had a fascination with time travel, but this appears even more bunk than the previous gravity claim. In this claim, they state that Nikola Tesla had a fascination with time, and believed that it was not an isolated dimension, but intricately interconnected with other aspects of the universe. The same source also claimed Nikola Tesla had involvements with the Philadelphia experiment, which is also coming up later in this iceberg. Hollow Earth. Hollow Earth refers to the belief that the core of the Earth is either entirely hollow, or hollow in some parts, allowing for life to flourish in underground alcoves. In many myths and folklore, the idea of a subterranean land inside of Earth is rather common. Greeks believed you could walk into the underworld through caverns. Celtic people believed in a cavern called Cruchon, from which strange creatures would emerge. The Angami Naga tribes in India claim their ancestors emerged from inside of the earth, as well as the Taino from Cuba, the natives of Trobriand Island, Brazilian Indians, and the Mandan people. A civilization believed to be living in this hollow earth is Agartha, a legendary kingdom in the inner surface of the earth. This gained traction in France as the French writer Louis Jacqueliot wrote that he had been given access to 15,000-year-old Indian manuscripts that tell of the ancient city of Asgartha. While this original entry did not place Agartha inside the core of the earth, Alexander St. Yves wrote that Agartha still existed and could be visited through astral projection. And Ferdinand Ossendowski, using this story as influence, would create the standardized version of this myth. Agartha is described as a legendary kingdom with a king of the world or sometimes multiple kings who are able to secretly influence the events of the surface world. This king or these kings had magical powers and advanced technology, and upon the surface advancing sufficiently, they would reveal themselves and share their secrets and treasures. It is proclaimed to be the spiritual center of the world. It is often overlapped with Rosicrucianism, the idea that there is a secret brotherhood working to advance humanity's enlightenment. The Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a set of almost 1,000 ancient Jewish manuscripts found over a 10-year period in the 40s and 50s. These scrolls contain some of the oldest surviving manuscripts of the entire books later included in biblical canon, and cast new light on the emergence of Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism. Before the discovery of these scrolls, Greek translations existed but were treated with suspicion, and the Hebrew Masoretic text version made changes to the Greek translation to better fit the vision scholars had in mind. With the introduction of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were able to cross-check with both translations, and found that often the text lined up more closely with the Greek translations. The Dead Sea Scrolls came out of the Qumran community. In essence, they were an apocalyptic hermit group that lived quietly in the wilderness, studying and praying, waiting for God to smite their enemies. While the scrolls contained most of the Old Testament, minus Esther, as it is believed the group looked down on her marriage to a Persian king, it also contained a lot of apocalyptic passages, including what is famously referred to as the War Scroll. Within some of these apocalyptic texts, there is mention of the Son of God, and a war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, which will lead to the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. Other hidden texts from the Apocrypha that were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls are the Wisdom of Ben Sirah, the Book of Tobit, and the Epistle of Jeremiah. The Wisdom of Ben Sirah contains ethical teachings that closely resemble Proverbs, but is all written by a single author instead of an anthology from various sources. These wisdoms include courtesy, politeness, duties of a man towards himself, others, and the poor and oppressed, along with attitudes towards society, the state, and God. He had interesting views on slaves and women, often showing little compassion for these groups, with specific distrust for women and the wish for harsh treatment for slaves. Of particular interest to biblical scholars, Ben Sirah called out famous men and identifies each of the parts of the Hebrew Bible that would eventually become canon, only leaving out 4 to 5 books. This wisdom provides great detail to scholars regarding the historical development and evolution of the Jewish canon. The Book of Tobit tells the story of a blind man Tobit and his son Tobias, who is sent to recover silver in Media, but he instead meets a woman named Sarah on his journey. She's afflicted by the demon Asmodeus, who slays her prospective husbands, but with the help of the angel Raphael, the demon is exorcised and she marries Tobias. Upon them both returning to Tobit, Tobit is then cured of his blindness. The final piece of Apocrypha is the Epistle of Jeremiah, which is attributed to Jeremiah addressing the Jews who are about to be carried away as captives to Babylon. The content of this letter is essentially a rant to the captives to not take up idolatry while captive in Babylon. Ancient Astronaut Theory. The ancient astronaut theory refers to a belief that intelligent extraterrestrial beings had visited Earth and made contact with humanity in ancient times. These visits are believed to have influenced the development of humanity's cultures, technologies, religions, biology, and art. For obvious reasons, this theory is not taken seriously by academics or archaeologists who claim it is pseudoscientific. Erich von Daniken was the leading proponent of this hypothesis in the 60s and 70s, gaining a large following through the publication of his book Chariot of the Gods. Carl Sagan has suggested that an earlier book he published with the astrophysicist Losif Shklovsky may have inspired a wave of writers built on their speculations. According to von Daniken, certain artifacts required more sophisticated technology than available to the cultures that constructed them. He believes they were created directly from these aliens, or by humans who were given the technology. He uses Stonehenge, the Moai of Easter Island, the Great Pyramids of Giza, and the Baghdad batteries as examples of this theory. He also posits that much ancient art and iconography throughout the world illustrates air and space vehicles, non-human intelligent creatures, astronauts, and other artifacts of advanced technology. He also stated that the beginning of many religions were brought about by humans worshipping these aliens and their advanced technology as gods in magic. The Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is an illustrated codex written in an unknown script referred to as Voynichese. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, the stylistic choices in the manuscript shows that it may have been composed in Italy during the Renaissance. The potential reasons that this manuscript exists are varied, but it is believed to be either a natural language, a code or cipher, a hoax, or a work of fiction. Since we are unable to determine the words, let's look at the illustrations and what they can tell us. There are 126 pages of herbal drawings, and this section is believed to detail pharmaceuticals. There are 17 pages detailing astronomical diagrams, with suns, moons, and stars, along with zodiac constellations. There are 20 pages of nude women bathing, and it is believed this may speak on the use of baths. There are 14 pages of cosmological diagrams of an obscure nature. There are 16 pages showing plant parts isolated in apothecary jars. And finally, there are 25 pages of what are believed to be recipes. The overall purpose of the book appears to serve as a way to address medieval or early medicine, and the astrological considerations are frequently used in herb gathering, bloodletting, and other medical procedures. The Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is a mythic alchemical ingredient that was believed to be capable of turning base metals into gold or silver, as well as make an elixir of life for rejuvenation and immortality. In alchemy, it was considered the most sought-after goal and the ultimate symbol of divine illumination. In antiquity, the recipe for creating the stone was traced to Greek philosophy using classical elements, the concept of anuma mundi, or the soul of the world, and creation stories as analogies for the process. According to Plato, the four elements are derived from a common source associated with chaos known as the prima materia. Later in the Middle Ages, early medieval alchemists built upon these ideas and were fascinated by the concept of metal transmutation and attempted to carry out the process. Through the analysis of each metal and its alchemical properties, it was believed that the transmutation could be effected by a rearrangement of these qualities through the use of a substance. According to legend, a 13th century philosopher, Albertus Magnus, is said to have discovered the stone. He does not confirm it in his writings, but he did say that he witnessed the creation of gold by transmutation. We only use 10% of our brain. This phrase is the belief that the brain is not used at its full capacity, and were we able to unlock the full use of our brain, we would be able to solve any issue we were to come across due to the massive jump in intelligence. This myth was most likely popularized in the early 1900s due to the misuse of neurological studies, and a misquote of psychologist William James, who claimed we only use a fraction of our mental and physical resources. This belief led to people looking into ways on how to unlock the use of the rest of our brain, and the belief that doing so could give people mystical psychic powers. The reality is that the portions of our brain are specialized for different tasks, and modern brain imaging shows that even during simple tasks, nearly all of the brain is active. Another way to quell the myth is brain damage. If we only use 10% of our brain, assuming that part was not the part damaged, it should have no effect, and yet any brain damage causes issues for the person on the receiving end. Secret societies. This entry refers to the many secret societies that have existed throughout time and amassed much secret knowledge about certain topics. or the belief that they are able to usurp the ruling parties in different countries. I've gone more in depth on this topic in a previous video, so be sure to take a look if that interests you. I'll post the video in the description if you are interested in a watch. Tier 2. Vatican Secret Archives. The Vatican Secret Archives, now known as the Vatican Apostolic Archives, is a collection of material owned by the Pope as sovereign of the Vatican City, held until death or resignation with ownership passing to his successor. The word secret is not meant to denote confidentiality, but instead that the archive is privately owned. During the end of the 19th century, however, Pope Leo XIII opened the archive to researchers, thousands of which now examine some of the documents each year. Even with it being opened, there are still some classified materials that are unable to be seen, and the official statement is that these files relate to contemporary private records of church figures from 1922 to anything after 1958. While this specific archive is open for research, several other archives were closed off until rather recently, such as the Archive of the Roman Inquisition, which was only opened in 1998. Given the time span of the Vatican and the power it held throughout history, there are many people who think that there are various secrets that are being held about numerous topics, ranging from UFO files, the chronovisor, which was believed to be a time-viewing machine held by the Vatican, or even political nefarious dealings that happened throughout history. Whether any of this exists remains a mystery. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene. The name is a bit of a misnomer, as we are unsure of the identity of this Mary, but many argue in favor of Mary Magdalene, a known follower of Jesus. While some of these pages are missing, specifically the beginning and the middle, what we do know is that Jesus was engaged with his followers, but left, and in his wake, his followers were anxious and distraught. The followers look to Mary and ask what she has heard from Jesus as a woman. She speaks of how she saw a vision and went to Jesus to decipher and analyze it. Jesus teaches that the inner self is composed of a soul, spirit, and a third mind which is between the two and can see the vision. The rest of the text is lost, and when it comes back, she is describing the vision as a revelation that shows the ascent of the soul, which engaged in dialogue with four powers that try to stop the ascension. Her story is then met with disapproval, as the followers do not believe Jesus would say this, nor that they would solely tell Mary over them. This story is argued on the basis of whether or not it fits into Gnostic beliefs, or the broader Christian context. The format is similar to other known Gnostic dialogues, and the story suits a Gnostic interpretation, yet some scholars suggest that the story is more similar to Jewish, Christian, and Stoic beliefs. For a brief overview of what Gnosticism is, it's essentially an offshoot of Christianity that believes that a flawed being created material reality, and that there are supreme beings that wish to rescue us from this flawed being. This will be extrapolated upon in later entries. Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was a secret intelligence program in the United States that imported more than 1.6 thousand German scientists, engineers, and technicians directly from Nazi Germany at the end of World War II, several of which were confirmed to be former members of the Nazi Party. The effort to recruit those with technical know-how began in 1945, as the Allies advanced into Germany and discovered the wealth of scientific talent and advanced research that contributed to the German war machine. In the following year, the Soviets would conduct a similar operation, emphasizing recruits from the same fields as the US, including rocket programs, aviation, and chemical/biological warfare. While the sole purpose of Operation Paperclip was not focused on rocketry alone, there were notable advancements in aeronautics which advanced the technologies that were pivotal in the space race between the USA and Soviet Russia. The most notable recruit through this program was undoubtedly Wernher von Braun, known for developing rocket and spaceflight technology, including the V-2 missile. He worked with the German army to develop new liquid propulsion-based missiles. He is considered a controversial figure, given his direct involvement with the Nazi Party and the slave labor required to build his V-2 rockets in Germany before being introduced to the US. Borel Castle. Borel Castle is an oolite limestone structure created by the eccentric Edward Leedskalnin. It's comprised of numerous large stones weighing several tons, sculpted into walls, tables, chairs, a crescent moon, a water fountain, and a sundial. Edward was a rather unusual figure with a storied history. The promotional material for Coral Castle claimed Edward was 26 when he was rejected by his 16-year-old fiancée in Latvia, choosing to leave to the United States where he would develop tuberculosis. He is said to have spontaneously healed himself through the use of magnets. He would then spend the next 28 years building Coral Castle, first in Florida City, before moving to its current location outside Homestead, Florida, all the while refusing to let anyone watch him work. A few teenagers would witness that he had caused the blocks of coral to move like hydrogen balloons. While not working, he would charge visitors to come view his castle. When asked how he did it, he would reply, "It's not difficult if you know how." He would eventually become ill and die of a kidney infection at the age of 64, and his property would change hands a few times before being turned into a tourist attraction. The grounds of the castle consisted of about 1,000 short tons of stones in the form of various carvings, furniture, and castle tower in which Edward lived. The stones themselves are fastened together without mortar, with their own weight being the only thing keeping them together. With that aside, the detail was so fine and the connections were so precise that no light passes through the joints of the structure. Of specific note, the gate is a rather incredible thing. It was a 9 short ton revolving 8-foot tall gate, carved so that it fits within a quarter of an inch of the walls. It was reportedly so well balanced that a child could open it with a push of their finger. This mystery lasted until 1986, when the gate stopped working and needed repair. Upon further examination, the door was operated through a metal shaft that was inserted from the top to bottom of the gate with an old truck bearing allowing for rotation, and it was the rust on that bearing that caused the bearing to fail. You can still visit the structure today, and looking at the website, it is stated that Edward had discovered the secrets of the pyramids and understood the laws of weight and leverage. Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism is an ancient Greek hand-powered model of the solar system. It is considered the oldest known example of an analog computer. Its use was predicting the astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance, as well as tracking the 4-year cycle of athletic games. The artifact was recovered from a shipwreck off the coast of the Greek isle Antikythera. The instrument is believed to have been designed and constructed by Hellenistic scientists between 100 and 205 BC, with its proposed calibration date being 178 BC. What makes this specific artifact especially interesting is that the machines of similar complexity did not appear again until the 14th century in Western Europe. Ancient nuclear war theory. This theory is centered around the idea that there was a war that took place in ancient times that resulted in the use of nuclear weapons, wiping everyone back to the Stone Age. The main reason for these beliefs revolve around 2 epic poems of Hinduism, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. The accounts of these epics are the Kurukshetra war between 2 rival families of the Kuru clan. According to the texts, battles were orchestrated through the use of vimanas, flying vehicles capable of delivering explosive weapons at high speeds. These explosives were described by their devastation, leveling the land whenever they impacted. In the Drona Parva, a section of the Mahabharata, it further describes the battles in which explosive weapons destroyed entire armies, causing crowds of warriors with steeds and elephants and weapons to be carried away as if they were dry leaves of trees. There are also a few verses that quite literally describe a nuclear device. A projectile charged with the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 10,000 suns, rose with all its splendor. It then describes how everything burst into flames, charred as to be unrecognizable, and even the food near the explosion was infected. Off the beaten path, a mineralogist would spot yellow-green stones in Cairo during 1996. After some testing, it was determined that these stones were actually glass, but what was odd was that these stones were dated to be older than the earliest Egyptian civilization. More of this unexplained glass was found scattered in the area, yet a question arose. What could have made this glass? Further studies led to the realization that this glass was formed at a temperature so high, it could only have been from a meteorite impact, yet no meteor was found. The other possibility was that it was formed from an atomic weapon. Tartaria and the Mud Flood. Tartaria, or Tartary, is a historical name for Central Asia and Siberia. Conspiracy theories state that this land hosted a lost civilization with advanced technology and culture. The globalized version of the story goes that demolished buildings such as the Singer Building, the original New York Penn Station, and the temporary grounds of the 1915 World's Fair in San Francisco actually belonged to this vast Tartaria empire. Other great works, such as the Great Pyramids and the White House, are further believed to be Tartarian structures. To further sweeten the pot, they also believed that they had achieved world peace and had unlimited wireless energy. But as all good things come to pass, so too would the Tartarian Empire. A supposed mud flood wiped out much of the world via depopulation, thus making old, slightly submerged buildings common. Both World War I and II were a cover to further destroy the remains of Tartaria, citing the real claim that extensive bombing campaigns destroyed historic buildings. Old photographs are used as reference to this claim, showing buildings with similar building styles, such as capital cities with domes and star forts. Other photos show deserted city streets in many capital cities around the world, and when people do start to appear, they appear in muddy streets with horses and buggies, offsetting the grand architecture around them. The believed reasoning for this theory is to shore up a cultural discontent with modernism and the belief that traditional styles are more aesthetically pleasing. Pyramid Unknown Construction Methods. Pyramid unknown construction methods refers to the uncertainty on how the pyramids were built. There are accepted theories, but there are also pretty wild conspiracies dedicated to this debate. Let's go over some of the accepted theories before delving into the fun stuff. To add to the next couple theories, it's also now believed that the workers for the pyramids were not slaves, as was considered earlier in history, but instead skilled workers hired for the specific job of building. They were paid in bread and beer, using hammers, chisels, and levers capable of handling the stone. The ramp theory is the most widely accepted theory by the Egyptology community, believing the pyramids were made by pure will and human power. This theory states that the blocks were dragged across the desert using sleds, rope, and wet sand to reduce friction. From the base of the pyramid, these stones would then travel up either straight or spiraled ramps. Levers were used once a significant height was reached and ramps were no longer needed. Another theory is the water shaft theory. In this, it's reported that the stones were transported through a water canal that was built all the way to the construction site. Floats were made of cedar or inflated animal skins wrapped in papyrus, then attached to the stones, allowing them to float to the shore before being carried to a moat surrounding the construction site. 4 water pipelines were then used to float the blocks up the hill, which were extended as the pyramid grew. Now for the fun stuff. We've all heard the theory that aliens built the pyramid, but another fun theory is that sound waves were used to levitate the blocks into place. Experiments have proved that you can use sound waves to levitate and move tiny particles and liquid droplets, up to something as big as a ping pong ball. While there are no current techniques developed that can move a bigger object through the use of sound waves, there have been some historical clues. Abul Hassan Ali al-Masudi, an Arab historian from the 10th century, wrote about ancient Egypt and the methods they supposedly used to move the massive stones. He claimed they placed papyrus magic scrolls imprinted with symbols underneath each stone. Then a metal rod was used to strike the stone, which initiated the levitation process. From this point, he states they would be guided along a fenced path with metal poles on each side. Some believe this describes the use of high-frequency sound vibrations to create the levitation effect. We will be revisiting this topic when I reach cymatics. Alchemy and the transmutation of consciousness. Alchemy, which we talked about a little earlier, is a branch of natural philosophy and proto-scientific traditional practice based in China, India, the Muslim world, and Europe. There are 3 specific strands of alchemy, being Chinese, Indian, and Western alchemy, and this will mostly be centered on the Western version. The start of alchemy was generally traced to Hellenistic Egypt, where the city of Alexandria was considered the center of alchemical knowledge. It was seen as a blend of Egyptian goldsmithing art, Greek philosophy, and different religious traditions. Our good friend Hermes wrote the Hermetica, in which the technical side specifically deals with alchemy. Alchemy, at its baseline, is an attempt to purify, mature, and perfect certain materials. Repeating the common aims here, they wish to transmute base materials into noble metals, create an elixir of immortality, and the creation of a panacea able to cure any disease, and the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The perfection of the human body and soul was thought to result from the alchemical magnum opus, or great work. In the specific interests of the transmutation of consciousness, it could be seen that you can apply these same concepts of alchemy to the human body. The base metal you start with being the unrefined human being, the Philosopher's Stone symbolizing an enlightened consciousness, and the process of transmutation being the death of the ego and rebirth of the true self. Carl Jung specifically studies the analogies between alchemy and psychology. Jung makes the case that the Philosopher's Stone is a latent reality that exists within the self rather than an external object, and that the alchemists were attempting to communicate this internal dialogue through the use of symbolism. Jung states that pre-scientific humans had no distinction between a subject and an object, and would project inner states onto external objects. If you wish to read more into this, look into the collected works of C.G. Jung, Volume 12. I'd also be willing to do a longer breakdown of this topic in a different video. Secret future military tech. Many technologies started in the military sector becoming more commonplace, such as the internet, GPS, microwaves, duct tape, and many more. This theory argues that there is technology that the military has access to that we are not privy to. These range from publicly acknowledged research programs to stuff that is only rumored. One such public research project is DARPA's Silent Talk, an initiative aiming to enable users to communicate without the use of vocalized speech. Through analyzing neural signals and mapping a person's EEG patterns to his or her individual words, you would be able to translate what word a person was thinking and then transmit it through an earpiece to a unit. There are a few different ideas rolling around for active camouflage, or a device that changes the look of a target on the fly to blend in with its surroundings. One example is hyperstealth, a light-bending material that hides anything a small distance behind it. Another example is the use of infrared active camouflage to make an object look like a different object, such as turning a tank into a sedan through infrared. Another interesting example is aircraft skin designed by Lockheed Martin. This skin can be grown onto an aircraft and conducts both data and electrical power through the material itself without wiring. Miniature sensors are placed throughout the aircraft's exterior, creating a network that monitors everything from structural stress to environmental conditions. This device is currently in advanced prototyping phase, but if these examples are public knowledge and readily available by a Google search, imagine what crazy things we are not allowed to see. Tier 3. MK Ultra. MK Ultra was an illegal human experimentation program started by the US CIA to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used during interrogations to weaken an individual's will and force confessions through the use of brainwashing and torture. During the early 1940s, Nazi scientists would conduct interrogation experiments on human subjects using a mix of barbiturates, morphine, and hallucinogens on prisoners of war. The aim of which was to develop a truth serum that would eliminate the will of the person examined. America's interest in drug-related interrogation experiments would begin in 1943, when the Office of Strategic Services began to develop a truth drug that would produce uninhibited truthfulness in an interrogated person. In 1947, the Navy would initiate Project Chatter, an interrogation program which saw the first use of testing with LSD on human subjects. This was then succeeded with Project Bluebird or Artichoke in 1950, an attempt at causing a person to commit an assassination through mind control by use of drugs on CIA agents. These events would eventually lead to the creation of the MK Ultra program in 1953 to 1973. Many documents were destroyed relating to the program in an attempt to hide what actually happened. But from what we do know, they spent $87.5 million adjusted for inflation, and the deputy director states that over 30 institutions and universities were involved in the experimentation. These places would test drugs on unknown citizens of all social levels, high and low, native-born American or foreign. Once the program began, they started administering LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and prostitutes. Later, they would dose CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, government agents, and members of the general public. Military members were threatened with court-martial should they come clean about the experiments. Several brothels would pop up where they would dose the clients under the assumption that they would be too scared to speak about the events. It was even claimed that surprise acid trips became an occupational hazard among CIA operatives. The research, however, would come to dismiss LSD altogether as too unpredictable. Among the subjects are Frank Olson, a man who would die a week after being dosed due to supposed severe depression from the drug; Ken Kesey, an early influencer of the development of hippie culture; and Harold Blower, an American tennis player who died from an injection of MDA after checking into an institute for depression following a divorce. Other alleged subjects include Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and Charles Manson, a cult leader. Philadelphia Experiment. The Philadelphia Experiment is an event claimed to be witnessed by an ex-merchant mariner named Carl M. Allen at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. Allen described an experiment where the U.S. Navy attempted to make a destroyer escort, the USS Eldridge, disappear in the results that followed. Forward, this event is widely understood to be a hoax. In Allen's account, while serving aboard the SS Andrew Forsyth, he witnessed the destroyer escort turn completely invisible, and the ship was transported to Norfolk, Virginia for several minutes before returning to the Philadelphia shipyard. The crew was supposed to have suffered from various side effects, including insanity, intangibility, and being frozen in place. Some story elements change depending on who is telling the story. Some state the experiment was based on an aspect of some unified field theory, which aims to describe the interrelated nature of electromagnetism and gravity. Others claim the researchers thought this theory would enable the use of large electrical generators to bend light around an object via refraction. Testing began in the summer of 1943, and was supposedly successful to a limited extent, with the ship being replaced by a greenish fog. When the ship reappeared, some sailors were embedded into the metal structure of the ship, with sailors going completely bananas. Another version includes different descriptions of the crew's effects, with some being physically fused to the bulkheads, others suffering from mental disorders, some were inside out, and others vanished. Those that survived were believed to have been subjected to brainwashing to maintain secrecy of the event. Human vibration/frequency manipulation. Atoms are in constant motion, vibrating in place due to the constant push and pull of their electrons and the thermal energy they possess. Your body is obviously made up of atoms, and so it reasons that you too have a vibration. Through the use of heavy machinery, vehicles, and music, we are often exposed to different frequencies of vibration. A Harvard study has shown that prolonged exposure to vibrations in the range of the resonant frequency of the human body can cause stress and discomfort. With this thought process in mind, it begs the question, if some frequencies can cause you stress, could other frequencies help to make you feel better? This field of using vibrations as cures or for its therapeutic value is rather rife with pseudoscience. And funny enough, a lot of the information I found about this topic is through the personal websites of chiropractors. We will be avoiding most of the claims for the moment and instead looking at scientific literature when available, but I will bring up their claims near the end. Full body vibration therapy is one potential use for vibrations changing human subjects. While the human body's vibratory frequency ranges from 5 to 20 Hz, exposing the human body to the range of 20 to 70 Hz is enough of a stimuli to provide adaptive effects to the body. It has been found to improve neuromuscular, respiratory, and cardiovascular function in animals. The only issue with this is while humans are found to benefit through changes in the cardiovascular and musculoskeletal systems similar to those observed after physical training, the data of the effects of WBV on the cognition in humans is minimal and inconclusive. Another potential use case of vibrations for health benefits is something I'm sure most of you have already heard of, binaural beats. The way they work is that two different tones are played, one in each ear, and then you feel the sensation of a third tone oscillating between the two. These beats can be perceived in the frequency range of 1 to 30 Hz, which coincides with human EEG frequency bands. This can affect a human through the brainwave entrainment hypothesis, which suggests that the brain's electrical activity can synchronize with the frequency of external stimuli like flashing lights or sounds. While there are many anecdotal statements that this works, the scientific literature is mixed. The main issue with the articles that talk about this is none of them use a standardized method, making comparisons between articles difficult. Now for some words from chiropractors. They state that each organ and body part has its own optimal frequency, which is crucial for its proper function. Staying within these ranges promotes health and well-being. However, if the frequency is wrong, this could lead to health issues and may be a marker for diseases. Staying within a low frequency state is associated with negative thinking and mental conditions such as chronic stress and depression, while higher frequencies promote emotional resilience and cognitive function. With this in mind, your environment is important, as you may pick up unwanted frequencies from it. The Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are believed to be a compendium of all universal events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, and future. Not just for humans, but all entities and life forms. The term comes from the religion of Theosophy and the spiritual movement of Anthroposophy. The Sanskrit term Akasha was introduced to the religion through Helena Blavatsky, who compared it to a form of life force, while also referring to an indestructible tablet of astral light that recorded both the past and future of human thought and action. The idea of an Akashic record was further pushed by Alfred Sinnett, who cited Henry Olcott's book, stating everything has come out of Akasha in obedience to a low motion inherent in it, and then passes away. No thing ever comes out of nothing. Finally, C.W. Leadbeater would formally identify the Akashic Records as something that a clairvoyant could read. Some people purport to be able to access these Akashic Records through things like deep meditation, guided visualization, working with a professional, or astral projection. Chronovisor. The chronovisor is a legend that the Vatican owned a device capable of viewing events from the past, like a television. As the story goes, a man named Father Pellegrino Ernetti was a Benedictine priest, exorcist, linguist, and musicologist with an interest in physics. As a scholar of music, Ernetti would work towards reconstructing sounds from the past, which would lead him to come up with the foundational principle of the chronovisor. Every event that happens leaves behind both visual and auditory energy traces that could be used to recall the original event. With a team of 12, they would combine antenna, cathode ray tubes, and other electronics to reconstruct electromagnetic waves and sound frequencies from the past and render them into images and audio. With this device, he claimed to have seen several things, from the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, Cicero delivering a speech in ancient Rome, and even the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. As his evidence for his claims, he showed a photograph of the face of Jesus during the crucifixion. Skeptics would say this photo had a striking resemblance to a postcard of a statue from an Italian church. As for the Vatican's role, after completion of the device, they would disassemble it and hide it within the walls of the Vatican's secret archives to prevent misuse of the device. Despite its legend, science has pointed out flaws in its foundation, such as the fact that energy dissipates over time and the impossibility of being able to single out specific historical signals amidst the noise of Earth's environment. To further add to the issues with this story, Father Ernetti would admit to fabricating the story shortly before his death. However, some argue this was coerced out from him. Cymatics. Cymatics is the phenomenon of powders forming shapes from the vibrations of the surface they are lying on. Different vibration frequencies cause different geometric patterns to form, with higher frequency creating more complex patterns. Experiments regarding this technique were carried out by Galileo Galilei in 1630 and Robert Hooke in 1680, but were later perfected by Ernst Chladni in 1787, who introduced them in his book systematically. This phenomenon would not gain a name, however, until the works of Hans Jenny in 1967. Hans would take the methodology developed by Chladni's experiments and highlight intricate organic harmonic images that reflected many universal patterns found throughout nature and living organisms. Of particular note, the vocalizations of the Sanskrit Om, regarded as the sound of creation, would make the powder form a circle with a center point, a symbol by which Om is represented. This phenomenon helps to show an ancient metaphysical idea that vibration is the fundamental creative force of the universe. Several religions and philosophies follow from this statement, such as how modern Hermetics believe that everything is a form of vibration, Hinduism believing the universe was born from the sound Om, and even the Bible, where God spoke his creation into being. DNA as storage. DNA digital data storage is the process of encoding and decoding binary data to and from synthesized strands of DNA. Using DNA as a storage medium has enormous potential because of its high storage capacity, but its practical use is very limited due to the high cost and slow read and write times. One particularly interesting challenge arose in 2015, where Nick Goldman announced the Davos Bitcoin Challenge, where each participant was given a vial of DNA and 3 years to decode it for the private key of a wallet with 1 Bitcoin. 2 days before the end of the challenge, Sander Woots would complete the challenge and claim the Bitcoin. Apart from the code, there was also a logo of the institute Nick Goldman was from, the logo of the company that printed the DNA, and a sketch of James Joyce. In June 2019, scientists reported that all 16 gigabytes of text from the English Wikipedia was encoded into synthetic DNA, and in 2021, scientists reported that a custom DNA data writer had been developed that was capable of writing data into DNA at 1 megabyte per second. In the interest of secrets specifically, the DNA of living organisms can potentially be used to store information as well. Synthetic biology can be used to engineer cells with molecular recorders that would allow storage and retrieval of information stored in the cell's genetic material. With CRISPR gene editing, you can also insert artificial DNA sequences into the genome of a cell. This is conspiratorially minded, but it makes you wonder if someone or something is walking around with secret information already. The Montauk Project. The Montauk Project is a conspiracy theory that alleges that there were a series of US government projects conducted at Camp Hero or Montauk Air Force Station in New York for the purposes of developing psychological warfare techniques, along with other more exotic research. This story appears to have started with the questionable account of Preston Nichols and Al Bielek, who both claim to have recovered repressed memories surrounding the events of the Montauk Project. Nichols would write alongside Peter Moon, pen name for Vincent Barbaric, a series of books known as the Montauk Project. These books would concern the activities that happened at Montauk Point, centering topics the US government/military were involved in at this location, such as time travel, teleportation, mind control, extraterrestrial life, as well as the staging of the Apollo moon landings. These events are seen as development to what happened in the Philadelphia Project. Both authors heavily encourage speculation of the events described, with the first chapter stating, whether you read this as science fiction or nonfiction, you are in for an amazing story. They would also describe the contents of the story as soft facts in their guide for readers, and would publish newsletters with updates to the story. In 2015, there was a film adaptation of the conspiracy named The Montauk Chronicles, which won Best Documentary Award at the Philip K. Dick Film Festival. Reality glitches. Reality glitches are things that happen that do not physically line up with how we understand the world to operate. You may have witnessed 2 people at a train station who looked and were wearing the same exact thing. Maybe you saw somebody turn a corner, but when you went to look, there was no one nearby. Some consider phenomena such as deja vu or the Mandela effect to be real-life examples of things not adding up. Some believe these glitches happen because we are living within an imperfect simulation. If you would like to read about the people who have had these events happen to them, check out our Glitch in the Matrix on Reddit. There are some very interesting accounts there. Tier 3. Kybalion. The Kybalion, full title being The Kybalion, A Study of Hermetic Philosophy of Ancient Egypt and Greece, is a book that was published in 1908 that breaks down the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. While it does share many values of the Hermetica, it is even more closely related to the ideas of modern occultist authors. The book itself is structured around 7 Hermetic principles, presented as immutable laws that govern the universe's operation. By presenting you with these principles, it enables you to achieve self-mastery and control over your own life by following these rules. I will offer a brief explanation of the interpretation of each. Rule 1. Mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This states that everything you see and experience is a creation of the mind, and that reality is shaped by consciousness. Rule 2. Principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. This suggests that there is harmony and similarity between different levels of reality, that the universe is consistent and mirrored. Atoms mirror planets, the inner world mirrors the outer. Rule 3. The principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This rule says that everything is always in motion, movement is everywhere. This applies to mental and spiritual energy as well, both of those having their own vibration and movement. Rule 4. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. We will use examples for this. Hot and cold are the same thing. One has more heat, one has less heat. Light and dark are the same. One has more light, one has less. Even concepts such as love and hate are simply a dial you can turn up and down, with various feelings in between. If two things seem different, they may just be extremes of the same thing. Rule 5. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swings manifest in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This rule essentially states that there is a pattern to all things. Day turns to night turns to day. High tide to low tide to high tide. A pendulum swings left and right and back again. There is a cycle to all things. Understanding the cycle allows you to better take life's lessons. Rule 6. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This law speaks for the fact that nothing happens by chance. If you look hard enough, you can find the reason for an event taking place. In that same being, you can see what might come to pass by seeing the cause in now. If you drop a ball, you could predict the ball will hit the ground. If you see a ball on the floor, it reasons that the ball was at one time dropped. Rule 7. The principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This is less about gender and more about two connected but opposite forces we associate with gender. Think yin and yang. Two forces, one active, assertive, and giving, the other receptive, nurturing, and creative. Everything has both of these forces in varying degrees, and both must work together to lead to the creation of anything. Boldness, a traditionally masculine trait, and preparation, a traditionally feminine trait, go hand in hand to making something successful. Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch was an ancient Jewish apocalyptic text, partially preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Book of Enoch contains 5 sections, detailing angels who fathered angel-human hybrids called Nephilim, with the rest of the book talking about Enoch's revelations and his visits to the heaven through traveling visions and dreams. The first section, the Book of Watchers, tells us about a group of 200 fallen angels called the Watchers. They took human wives, and their giant children, the Nephilim, caused great bloodshed by killing and eating men and the beasts of the land, sea, and air. Then the Watchers would teach mankind about warfare, metalworking, jewelry, enchantments, astrology, and the knowledge of the sun, moon, and stars. This would cause God to call to Noah that he may hide himself and make a boat. He would also command other angels to cause the Nephilim to turn on each other and capture the fallen angels that gave all of these secret arts. The second section, the Book of Parables, is a bit of an oddball. It was not found in Greek translations, nor with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Scholars are unsure if this book was a later addition, potentially even replacing an earlier work, the Book of Giants, which would potentially fit in the gaps. Even with the uncertainty, we will still discuss this section. Contained within this book are 3 parables. In the first, he envisions the architecture of heaven, and sees that everything on earth is being recorded for the day of reckoning. The wicked rulers will be cast down, while the just will inherit light and peace. Along with this, the watchers are to be condemned for the knowledge they have shared. The second parable mentions what is called the Son of Man, neither angel nor man, but a being that sat beside God since before creation. It is he who will appear at the end of days to judge the fallen and rescue the righteous. This Son of Man will reveal the hidden path of wisdom that was once forbidden to mankind, and he will bring judgment upon the watchers, their children, and the kings who swore allegiance to them. The third parable is a vision of Enoch being taken to the throne of glory and shown the tablets of heaven, where the names of the righteous are written. Enoch is told that he will become immortal and dwell among the archangels as a witness to the divine. He learns of the secret structures of the universe, the stars, the nature of sin and redemption, and in some versions it's hinted that Enoch was transfigured into the Son of Man figure he saw. The third book, known as the Astronomical Book, contains descriptions of the movement of heavenly bodies in the firmament as knowledge that was revealed to Enoch during his trips to heaven, as well as describing a solar calendar that was used by the Dead Sea sect. A year was comprised of 364 days, divided into 4 equal seasons of 91 days each. The fourth book, the Book of Dreams, details 2 apocalyptic dreams shown to Enoch. The first dream shows Enoch of the coming flood, of how the earth will split open and humanity will drown in corruption, but it shows that Noah will survive to renew creation. The second dream, known as the Animal Apocalypse, is a retelling of the entire story of humanity, using animals to represent people, angels as humans, and God as the Lord of the sheep. It jumps around between Adam and Eve's fall to the Watcher's descent, the birth of the Nephilim, the flood, and the rise and fall of Israel's kingdom. It ends with a vision of a new Jerusalem being built, while a white bull appears, representing the Messiah. The final book, the Epistle of Enoch, serves as a final hurrah from Enoch towards his descendants. He warns of a time of sin and deceit, and to cling to wisdom, for one day the judgment will come. There's also the Apocalypse of Weeks, dividing human history into 10 symbolic weeks, each representing moral decline and renewal, with the final week giving the righteous new knowledge before humanity is judged and a new heaven and new earth is built. Eleusinian Mysteries. The Eleusinian Mysteries were an initiation held every year for the cult of Demeter and Persephone in ancient Greece, and later spread to Rome. The rites, ceremonies, and beliefs were kept secret, and it was believed for those initiated that participation in these rituals would grant a reward in the afterlife. One line of thought that modern scholars hold is that the mysteries were intended to elevate man above human and into the divine, assuring redemption by making participants gods and conferring immortality. The mystery rituals were split into 2 parts, the lesser and greater mysteries. To become an initiate, you had to swear a vow of secrecy, and only then were you allowed to participate in the lesser mystery. 1 year later, assuming you had participated in the lesser and were already an initiate, you could then attend the greater mystery. What we do know about the mysteries is limited, but here is what we know along with our best guesses. The lesser mysteries were a way to cleanse, confess, and learn. A young piglet was offered as a sacrifice, and then the initiate would gather at the river Ilissos for a ceremonial washing. There was a reenactment of Persephone's abduction, where initiates were taught secrets of Persephone and Demeter. Along with this, sacred objects of the cult were shown and carried. The greater mysteries started much the same way, with symbolic cleaning and sacrifices being made. But then there began a great procession of the initiate from Athens to Eleusis, walking along the sacred way. The initiates would carry sacred objects in chests as they traveled, and at specific spots they would call out dirty jokes in remembrance of an old woman who cracked jokes with Demeter to help soothe her. They would also call out an epitaph for either Dionysus or Iacchus. Upon reaching Eleusis, they would hold an all-night vigil, supposedly for commemorating Demeter's search for Persephone. At some point, they would drink a concoction of barley and pennyroyal, which was believed to have ergot, a fungus with similar effects to LSD. They would then enter the Telestrion, a large hall for their secret rites. From here it becomes blurry as to what actually happened, but we believe there were more reenactments, displays of sacred items, recitation of sacred words, and feasting and dancing. At some point, Demeter was supposedly shown to all participants. As for what happened to the ritual, as Christianity became more popular, the prestige of the ritual began to fade. Emperor Julian, the last pagan emperor, attempted to restore the mysteries, but by then it was too late. Elements of the cult survived in the Greek countryside, with locales partially transferring the rites and duties onto Saint Demetrius, who gradually replaced Demeter. The Black Cube. So, finding information on this topic has been incredibly difficult for me. With that in mind, understand that this is my interpretation of what I have read on this matter, and may not be fully in line with what others might say on this topic. The Black Cube is considered to be a representation of Saturn, and appears to represent matter, containment, and a metaphysical cage for the soul, much in the same way that Saturn was trapped in Tartarus, which is another interpretation of the Black Cube. The basis of this symbol representation was further sealed when we discovered the hexagon on Saturn, which is seen as a black cube from a specific angle. Saturn itself represents several things, both as a planet and a god. In mythology, he is represented as both a bringer of order and a tyrannical devourer. He's also seen as a great teacher, governing through karma, discipline, restriction, and sacrifice. As a planet, Saturn is the furthest planet we can see with our eyes and represents the border between the known and the unknown. The planet is also bound by its many rings, which are seen as representative of imprisonment. With all this in mind, the articles that I found relating to this appear to describe that there is a hidden cult dedicated to Saturn. Not in terms of literal worship, but through use of channeling Saturnian force to maintain control. This can be seen through various forms of religious worship in other societies, where the Saturnian principles of hierarchy, secrecy, and discipline are embedded. This happens through the fixation of rigid rituals, dogmas, and rules, and is said to make them all devoid of a real living connection to the spirit. By the simple act of involving limitations, it no longer resembles divinity, which has no limitation. The article then claims that essentially all religions have fallen into this, but especially the Abrahamic religions. It also states that certain companies, including BlackRock, are founded with the purpose of pushing this agenda of control. With that in mind, the symbolism to break out of this pattern is to unfold the cube into a cross, representing breaking the constraints of material existence for higher spiritual understanding. The point of this, as far as I can tell, is to break these bonds of rigidity and rule, not with division or violence as that feeds into the aspects, but by love and honoring differences based on their individual strength. The Great Work. The Great Work is a concept of Hermeticism and other occult traditions. By accomplishing the Great Work, you've reached the culmination of the spiritual path and attained enlightenment, thus rescuing your soul from the forces that bind it. In essence, the Great Work signifies self-transcendence. Early Hermetics saw the Great Work as obtaining the Philosopher's Stone. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn described it as the creation of man by himself. The Lema would say that the spiritual practice leading to the union of self and all through true will, or more specifically the moment there is a union between the self and the divine, is what the Great Work is. Chaos Magic. Chaos magic is a modern tradition of magic, largely developed based off the work of Austin Osman Spare. The basis of chaos magic is that there is no absolute truth, and all symbols and rituals are arbitrary and only effective due to the belief of the practitioner. With this in mind, chaos magic teaches that the essence of magic is controlled by belief, and by changing those beliefs, you can effectively control the effects of magic. One of the defining tenets of chaos magic is that belief is simply a tool for achieving effects. Peter J. Carroll, one of the founders of chaos magic, describes that any system of magic can be broken down and manipulated to achieve certain ends, but that there is no objective truth in these complex systems of symbols. He is quoted as saying, "When stripped of local symbolism and terminology, all systems show a remarkable uniformity of method." The real difficulty with chaos magic is that the ego has been conditioned with the beliefs that might challenge their ability to channel magic. Any condition must first be broken down so that you can allow yourself to simply change your beliefs. One tool used to train yourself to let go of these ideas is the idea of paradigm shifting. Carroll suggests assigning different worldviews onto a dice, rolling it, and then inhabiting the associated belief for a set time. Carroll describes that to help maintain a stable sense of self, one perpetuates their existence by their lists of likes and dislikes, ams and am-nots. And by trying to separate these functions from yourself, you are better able to float between views. The Demiurge. The Demiurge, otherwise known as Yaldabaoth, is a figure in Gnosticism, which itself is an offshoot of Christianity. In this system, he is seen as the creator of the material reality, but unlike in other religions, he is considered a flawed, incompetent, and in some interpretation, a malevolent entity. To understand more about the Demiurge, it's best to have a short summary of how he came into being. Everything began from the monad, or the One. From this source, aeons were created, divine beings that existed in male-female pairs. These aeons live within the pleroma, or the pure, perfect divine reality. One such aeon is Sophia, who represents wisdom. One day, she decided to create something without her other half. This act of creation resulted in a malformed, incomplete being known as the Demiurge. Because of his incompleteness, he was unable to see the higher realms and thinks himself the only god in existence. Ashamed of what she had done, Sophia cast the Demiurge from the pleroma into a lower, chaotic realm. Even in his malformed state, he still held a piece of divinity through Sophia, and with this divinity, he decided to create his own realm to rule over. In his ignorance of what true divinity is due to a lack of wisdom, he created a reality much like him, flawed and imperfect. The Demiurge creates helpers called archons to further his plans, and begins to try and create Adam based off the reflections of divine beings they saw. Adam's inanimate and lifeless until Sophia intervened, breathing the spark of divinity into him, thus creating the first human. Thus in this story, humans are a bit of a paradox, confined by the material while containing the divine. Realizing that humans are not the same as his other creations, the Demiurge becomes paranoid and seeks to control humans through ignorance. Continuing with the story of Adam and Eve, in the Gnostic text, it is actually Sophia that tempts the pair by the use of a snake to break them free of the illusion presented by the Demiurge. This act is what kicks off the Demiurge's realization that there is actually some form of higher power, and thus begins the active hostilities between the Demiurge and the Archons versus Sophia and the Aeons. We will be revisiting the work of the Aeons a bit later in this iceberg. Tier 5, Simulation Hypothesis. The simulation hypothesis proposes that we are almost certainly living in a simulation due entirely to chance. If a simulated world was possible to create, then there could be so many simulated individuals that any random chosen conscious entity would almost certainly be in a simulation. With this in mind, there are one of three options. Either simulations are not possible due to technological limitations or self-destruction, advanced civilizations choose not to create these simulations at all, or if an advanced civilization does create simulations, then the number of simulations would far exceed base reality, and we therefore are almost certainly living in a simulation. This train of thought is often argued either for or against. Some believe that simulated humans would not have consciousness in the same way unsimulated humans do. Others argue that to fully simulate the universe, you would need more matter than that universe holds, and thus it would be impossible. Even if you agree with the premise of the argument, there is no proof of technology that would be able to facilitate such high-fidelity ancestor simulations. Others argue that advancement to the levels of that technology would make the information from such a simulation unnecessary. Those in favor of this hypothesis often use philosophical statements to defend their side of the hypothesis, such as the butterfly dream or Descartes. The butterfly dream refers to Zhuangzi's problem, where he tells of a story where he was a butterfly, then woke up as himself. Who is to say the butterfly is not dreaming of being a human? Descartes states that there are no certain indications by which we may clearly distinguish wakefulness from sleep, and concludes that it is possible that he is dreaming and his perceptions are false. Soul trap theory. Soul trap theory claims that material reality functions as a containment system designed to keep consciousness from returning to its true source. When a person dies, rather than ascend directly to their final resting place, their soul is instead intercepted by a form of false afterlife. Within this false afterlife, one is shown comforting images of their departed family, spiritual guides, or even their believed gods, all standing beside the light that draws someone in. Upon entering this light, your memory is wiped, and you reincarnate into your next vessel. The reason for this system depends on where you hear it from. Some say that malicious entities feed off the emotions one has while within the material realm, and that leaving would take away a source of energy from these entities. This also shows up in two other religions in slightly different forms, namely Gnosticism and Buddhism. In Gnosticism, the demiurge seeks to keep the divine spark of humanity trapped within his realm, and fabricates the light seen after death as an imitation of the divine realm. Buddhism does not see this as malicious, simply that your own ignorance is what keeps you trapped in the cycle, and as soon as you break the illusion of self and attachments, you are free to leave the material realm and ascend to divinity. Cosmic censorship. This connects two similar hypotheses about the singularities that arise in Einstein's equations. In general relativity, when a massive star collapses, it forms a singularity. These singularities are a point in space where density and gravity become infinite, and physics breaks down. If these singularities were exposed to the rest of the universe, there would be regions where causality and predictability break down, and physics would be unable to predict what would happen. Roger Penrose proposed that nature prevents these regions from being visible, thus censoring them. There are two versions of this proposal, and they do not rely on each other, and thus could both be true, false, one or the other, etc. Weak cosmic censorship states that all singularities created by gravitational collapse are hidden inside of event horizons, meaning this naked singularity can't be observed from the outside, maintaining that physics is predictable to external observers. Strong cosmic censorship states that the laws of physics and determinism never fail. This means that even if one were to fall into a black hole, you would never reach a place where space-time loses its predictability. Regardless, the fact that these singularities exist lead to the unsettling realization that reality isn't stable everywhere. CERN reality manipulation. This theory revolves around CERN's use of the Large Hadron Collider and the potential disruption its use has caused for the material reality. Theories claim that by using this device, they have either opened a portal, shifted the timeline, or even potentially destroyed the universe. Some point towards the statue of Shiva at CERN as a point of contention, specifically the group of people who surrounded the statue in black cloaks that was later revealed to be a hoax. The use of the Large Hadron Collider is thought by a few to have created the Mandela effect. On the opposite side of things, people argue that protons collide all the time in nature. Cosmic rays hit Earth's atmosphere billions of times per second, and the highest energy cosmic rays are about 10 million times more powerful than anything the Large Hadron Collider can produce. With this in mind, it would reason that if reality would be destabilized by these forces, reality would have been destroyed a long time ago. Archons and spiritual parasitism. Archons are the assistant of the demiurge in Gnosticism. They are seen as malevolent, sadistic beings who control the earth, as well as many thoughts, feelings, and actions of humans. They are described as having bodies, both male and female, with the faces of beasts. There are 7 archons, including the demiurge, and each of them represent a different thing that binds the soul to the material world. One archon, Sabaoth, was said to turn from his master the demiurge and repent, where Sophia would elevate him and allow him to help her against his former master. The rest of these archons are thought to keep us trapped within the material world by enforcing forgetfulness, creating false laws and religions, and binding souls to reincarnate through ignorance of their divine origin. As each archon is considered to reside over a planet, it is said that when one dies, one must pass through each of the archon's influences. In doing so, they would be asked questions from these archons, and if one cannot answer, then they are returned to the cycle and must try again next time. The idea of spiritual parasitism is used to describe the influence of these archons on humanity. They wish to generate fear, anger, and despair to keep consciousness low and fragmented, as well as direct worship and obsession back to themselves. In these ways, by maintaining the status quo, they ensure humanity is constantly feeding them. Breakaway civilizations. Breakaway civilizations is a descriptive term for the theory that at some point in history, a group of people broke off from mainstream society and hid themselves away with knowledge and technology that is not currently available to society at large. One specific theory from a man named Richard Dolan, a UFO researcher, states that the idea of a breakaway civilization is very possible. In the 1920s, he found that scholarly articles surrounding physics and engineering started showing up in Germany, but they all disappeared when the Nazis took over. Some of these articles talked about a breakthrough in physics that could translate to high-technology forms of propulsion. However, he believes that by this time, a program was most likely started working on implementing physics and engineering theories to create more advanced technology. It's believed by him that this group spanned countries, and was more similar to a fraternity. Regardless of when this organization was started, the Nazis took charge and provided an entire national infrastructure to allow for this progress to be made. Dolan does not believe that this was solely a Nazi invention, but there was enough space for overlap in working together. They did this through the use of private-owned land, which is an example of how many Nazis were able to escape to Argentina. He also believes that a reported sighting of a UFO fleet over Washington, D.C. in the 1950s was a warning from the breakaway civilization to stay away from the Nazis that escaped, as a show of force that they could reach the interior U.S. Another case made was that Admiral Byrd's expedition to the Antarctic was yet another encounter with this breakaway civilization, and they came upon technology they were ill-equipped to deal with. This is one such example used to explain that the UFOs we spot on Earth are potentially just advanced technology owned by private interests. Another instance of the potential for this claim from a US Marine known as Michael Herrera. During his service in the early 2000s, while on a mission in an Indonesian jungle, he claimed to have witnessed a massive, silent, triangular UFO near a black operations site. He believes that the black ops site was being used for illegal activities, potentially human trafficking. However, there were human operators defending the craft who turned him away. Consciousness as the fabric. Consciousness as the fabric refers to the idea that the universe is actually made up of the mental, as consciousness produces reality. This is a very similar idea to what was presented as one of the core tenets of the Kybalion. Since we already have covered that before in a previous tier, let's look towards a totally different stream of thought on the topic. Quantum mysticism is a set of New Age metaphysical beliefs that seek to relate spirituality to the ideas behind quantum mechanics. This line of beliefs came about from quantum experiments in the early 20th century, specifically the observer effect in the wave-particle duality. Both of these experiments in quantum mysticism are used to convey the idea that consciousness shapes reality. Quantum mysticism's core tenet is that reality exists in a flux state, much like Schrödinger's cat, until it is observed by consciousness. Once this happens, the potential contained in reality is collapsed into a definitive state. With this idea in mind, several things can come from these conclusions. For starters, they propose that due to quantum entanglement, the entire universe is an interconnected field of consciousness, and that individuals are localized expressions of this field. With reality's probabilistic nature, thought and intentions can theoretically influence physical outcomes. This is shown in some modern-day mysticism through the law of attraction. Physicists reject this line of thinking, however, and state that it is confusing quantum mechanics with metaphysical speculation. Tier 6. You are God. The concept that you are in fact God is repeated in a few religions. Bill Hicks had a comedic bit referencing this, starting off as a news anchor reading a segment. Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, There is no such thing as death, life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves. Several religions back this claim up. Hinduism, specifically the Advaita Vedanta, teaches that everything you perceive, including yourself, is Brahman, or absolute reality, appearing as different things through Maya, or illusion. When ignorance is destroyed through knowledge, you realize that you are totality. Taoism states that Tao is the source of heaven and earth. Humans are expressions of Tao, or in other words, humans are the Tao experiencing itself. Mahayan Buddhist schools teach that Buddha's nature is possessed by all beings equally. You are already a god. Gnosticism teaches that all humans carry a divine spark of God, and following that to its conclusion, since you are the spark, you are God. Dissolution theory. Dissolution theory is not a real term, but a way to describe a certain train of thought. Following the Gnostic cosmology, creation was not seen as a positive, good act. The creation of the demiurge and the demiurge's creation of material reality were both negative acts. This flips the idea on its head, as creation is normally considered to be a positive, yet in this instance, creation was both equal to corruption. With this in mind, the truest act of a divinity would not be to create, but to destroy. Enlightenment thus is an act against creation by actively breaking down the illusions created by the demiurge and to return to pure unity. Some other occult schools of thought follow this idea, rebelling against imposed order. In those beliefs, creation is a limitation, and one must destroy the created form to return to the boundlessness that is pre-existence. Form is bondage, formlessness is freedom. I would also like to formally state that I do not condone suicide, and this topic is not meant to represent suicide. What is being discussed right now is purely philosophical, and the ideas within this topic can be seen as symbolic, as opposed to the physical destruction of yourself or others. If this makes you feel a certain way hearing these topics, please reach out to someone close to you. For me, being a faceless internet weirdo, I genuinely do hope you are all doing mentally well, and I do not wish for anyone to feel conflicted by anything listed here, as this is all just for harmless fun. God-Truth Paradox. The God-Truth Paradox is also not a real term. The paradox is that upon fully understanding the absolute nature of reality, reality itself can no longer continue as a separate entity. In the Advaita Vedanta, illusion is what makes the multiplicity appear real, as it separates Brahman, or absolute reality, from itself. Upon fully understanding of the nature of reality, the illusion is shattered and the separation ends. In this train of thought, reality exists because separation exists. If an observer were to fully perceive reality, there would be nothing left to observe. The knower and the known are at that point indistinguishable from each other. In reality, as we understand it, can no longer exist. Gnosis death. In Gnosticism, we are all part divine and part material. The goal of Gnosticism is to achieve gnosis, or to rejoin the pleroma. When one achieves gnosis and escapes the world of the archons, it passes through the celestial layers and ultimately rejoins the pleroma. In doing so, however, the separate spark that you once were dissolves back into the unity of the pleroma. In essence, liberation from the material equals annihilation of the individual. You are trading selfhood for totality. In other religions, enlightenment preserves you in an ideal form, free to live out the rest of infinity. But in Gnosticism, you as a distinct entity no longer exist. Union with the Godhead is not the perfection of self, but the erasure of it. Omega Point. The Omega Point is a theorized future event in which the entirety of the universe spirals towards a final point of unification. This term was invented by a French Jesuit Catholic priest, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Teilhard argues that the logical conclusions to the phrase Christ describes himself as, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He envisions evolution not just as a biological process, but a culmination towards a final, ultimate state, the Omega Point. This Omega Point is described as a single, infinite mind. Individuality ceases, leaving only pure awareness as the cosmos becomes an eternal intelligence. All right, boys and girls. And that is the end of the video. I would have liked to have found more topics for the final tier, but most of what I found fell into similarities to either other topics on the list or with other topics on that final tier. Who would have guessed the culmination of religion is becoming or fusing with God? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please leave a comment, like, or consider subscribing to the channel, as that really helps drive me towards creating more videos. Regardless, I thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a nice day, and take care, everyone.